Scientists are giving extreme weather warnings. Earth could be entering a mini ice age as the sun hibernates. A solar minimum could be referring to a period in which the sun releases less energy. According to scientists, a mini solar minimum is about to grip the Earth, and the planet could face cold weather and harsh storms for the next 3 decades, causing a mini ice age. Now, we've had ice ages in the recent past, one of them being the Maunder minimum, also known as the prolonged sunspot minimum. It's the name used for the period around 1645 to 1715. That's the time where sunspots became exceedingly rare, as was then noted by solar observers. This is according to Wikipedia. Astronomers before John Eddy published this landmark paper Science in Science, had named the period after the solar astronomers Annie Maunder, who lived in between 1868 and 1947, and her husband Edward Maunder, who studied how sunspot latitudes changed with time. And the period which the Maunders examined included the second half of the 17th century. Their papers were published, citing earlier papers, and because Annie Maunder had not received a university degree, restrictions at the time caused her to contribute to the publicity, not recognizing her, so it was taken by her husband. Now, during the 28-year period from 1672 to 1699, within the Maunder minimum, observations revealed fewer than 50 sunspots in 28 years. Fewer than 50 sunspots. This contrasts with the typical 40,000 to 50,000 sunspots seen in modern times over a 75-year sampling. You can imagine 50 sunspots compared to 40 to 50,000. The Maunder minimum occurred in a much longer period, lower than average European temperatures, which is likely to have been primarily caused by, they said, volcanic activity. Now, what about something similar happening to us? Sean Martin Express UK reports that the Earth could be bracing a mini ice age soon, as experts warn a solar minimum could last until an unbelievable amount of time, up to the 2050's. Now, that's for 30 years. Sunspot activity on the surface of the sun follows a well-known, little understood 11-year solar cycle. And the activity rises and falls, creating what we call solar maximum and then solar minimum. And during the solar maximum, the sun is more powerful and is littered with sunspots. And the opposite happens when we have a solar minimum, which it did about 2 years ago. We entered into it. Energy from our host sun begins to lessen, but one expert warns that the sun will enter a period of hibernation this year, 2020, what's known as the Grand Solar Minimum, GSM. Professor Valentina Zakharova from the Department of Mathematics, Physics and Electrical Engineering at Northumbria University in the UK says that this could cause global temperatures to drop by 1 degree Celsius. And even though that sounds very negligible, it could have major ramifications for our planet. It could even slow down agricultural production, she says. Now, she added that the sun's hibernation period may last for another 30 years, which will lead to wetter and colder summers. And she explains that the sun, our sun, is approaching a hibernation period. She says less sunspots will be formed on our solar surface, and thus less energy and radiation will be emitted towards the planets and the Earth, less energy and radiation towards our solar system. The reduction, she says, in temperature will result in cold weathers on Earth, wet and cold summers, cold and wet winters. We'll possibly get big frosts as this happens now in Canada, where we see temperatures of minus 50 degrees Celsius. I'm glad I don't live in Canada anymore. I used to live in Montreal. We were in the snow belt. We had worse cold than Alaska did in Anchorage. Can you imagine? That was it. Now, It's even worse now, minus 50. She goes to say, but this is only the start of the grand solar minimum. There is more to come in the next 33 years. The last grand solar minimum, which comes around roughly every 400 years, came in the 17th century. Research produced by NASA indicates during the last prolonged solar minimum, the cooling temperatures in the northern hemisphere were exacerbated by the Maunder minimum, which we just talked about. The Maunder minimum, that was between 1672 to 1699, where we had the 28-year period with fewer than 50 sunspots, as contrasted to the sunspots of a 25-year period sampling 40,000 to 50,000. So you can imagine how hibernating the sun was. And now, during this period, she says, very few sunspots appeared on the surface of the sun, and the overall brightness of the sun also decreased slightly. Already in the midst of a colder than average period called the Little Ice Age, Europe and North America went into a deep freeze. Alpine glaciers extended over valley farmlands. Sea ice crept south of the Arctic, and the famous canals in the Netherlands froze regularly, an event that is rare today. Now, during that period, temperatures in the northern hemisphere on the land and in the winter were reportedly 1.7 degrees Celsius lower than they are today. That led to shorter seasons for planting and harvesting, and ultimately the food shortages that took place. What NASA described as a little ice age was taking effect. Professor Zakharova said, "We can only hope that the mini ice age will not be as severe as it was during the Maunder minimum." And she goes on to explain that this would dramatically affect food harvests in middle adult latitudes because the vegetables and fruits will not have enough time to harvest, to ripen. So it could lead to a food deficit for people and animals, as we have seen in the past couple of years, when the snow in Spain and in Greece in April and May demolished the vegetable fields, and the UK had a deficit of broccoli and other fruits and vegetables. But other experts disagree with her, stating that any cooling effect will be vastly offset by our climate change, meaning global warming. Solar scientist Matthew Owen said, thus, there will probably be no detectable effect on global climate. Well, we'll have to wait and see. But for now, all I know is that last year we had terrible snows and floods, and this year we're also having even more cold. So it could be that she's right. I hope not, but it could be that she's right. I'll leave a link below for you for this. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.